A crowded street in New York City. Traffic, noise, people rushing. A little girl stands alone at the edge of a crosswalk. Frozen, confused. Cars begin moving. No one notices the tiny figure about to step into danger. Except one man. Daniel Hayes, 42, a single dad. He steps forward instantly, grabs her hand gently, pulls her back just in time as a yellow taxi roars past. The girl looks up at him, shaking. Minutes later, several black SUVs arrive. Doors fly open, and everything changes. The hidden truth is finally out. He saved a billionaire's world without even knowing her name. Destiny begun. Daniel Hayes was a man whose entire life was a testament to the quiet, often overlooked power of observation. At 42, his presence was measured not by the volume of his voice or the flash of his attire, but by the profound, steady silence he maintained. A shadow moving through the salt-crusted, rain-slicked canyons of downtown Manhattan. To the thousands of high-powered tech executives, lawyers, and bankers who rushed past him every day, he was simply another face in the crowd, a man in a navy blue canvas work jacket carrying a heavy, scratched metal toolbox. They saw the grease under his fingernails. They didn't see the mind that once coordinated high-altitude logistics for elite military operations. Daniel was a master of the invisible systems that kept the city breathing. He worked as a specialized senior technician and delivery lead for a firm that maintained the complex heating and cooling grids of New York's monoliths. He understood the structural integrity of complex machines, the hidden flow of electricity, and the volatile chemistry of urban movement. But more than that, he understood the weight of silence. He was a widower, a title he wore with a stoic, heartbreaking dignity that few in the frantic city could truly comprehend. 5 years ago, his wife Elena had passed away, the victim of a sudden, aggressive illness that no amount of money or medical expertise could halt. Since that day, Daniel had become the sole architect of his son Noah's world. Noah was 9, a bright, observant boy who had inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's curious, sparkling eyes. Daniel's life was a meticulously constructed fortress of routine. 5 a.m. coffee, 6 a.m. school lunches, and a commitment to being home every single evening to help with fourth-grade math. He didn't chase promotions or bonuses that would take him away from his son. He chose the lower path so he could be present for the moments that actually mattered. He taught Noah that true value wasn't found in a bank account, but in the integrity of one's word and the ability to stay calm when the world around you was screaming. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the air in Manhattan was thick with the scent of ozone and exhaust. Daniel was finishing a long shift, walking Noah home through the chaotic, high-volume intersection of 5th and 57th. The city was at its peak decibel, a symphony of honking horns, the whistling wind between skyscrapers, and the relentless, rhythmic thud of thousands of feet on concrete. It was a place where everyone was looking for something, a taxi, a promotion, a sign, but almost no one was looking at the person right next to them. Daniel's mindset was always calibrated for safety. In his line of work, missing a single vibrating bolt meant a system failure. In his role as a father, missing a single emotional detail was simply not an option. As they reached the corner, the crowd surged forward on a walk signal, a human tide of briefcases and designer handbags. But Daniel stopped. His internal radar, honed by years of watching for anomalies, caught a flicker of stillness in the middle of the motion. That was when he saw her, a little girl, no older than 7, standing at the very edge of the curb. She was wearing a coat that likely cost more than Daniel's truck, a delicate wool piece in pale cream, but her face was a map of pure, unadulterated terror. She was frozen, her small hands clutching the hem of her jacket, her eyes wide and glassy as she watched the sea of yellow taxis begin to surge forward as the light changed. She was overwhelmed by the sensory assault of the city, her small frame vibrating with the effort of not collapsing. The walk signal vanished, replaced by the blinking orange hand of "Don't walk." The traffic began to roar, a wall of steel and glass moving at 50 miles per hour. The girl, caught in a trance of panic, took a tentative, staggering step into the path of a speeding black delivery van. The driver, distracted by a navigation screen, didn't see her. The crowd behind her was already looking toward the next block. Daniel didn't have time to shout. He didn't have time to calculate the risk. With a burst of speed forged by years of physical labor, he lunged forward, his arm extending like a protective wing. He caught her small, cold hand just as her foot touched the dangerous asphalt, yanking her back into the safety of his own large, grounding frame. A yellow taxi roared past exactly where she had been standing, the wind from its passage ruffling the girl's hair and sending a discarded newspaper spinning into the air. Daniel immediately knelt down to her level, ignoring the indignant huffs and excuse-me's of the people forced to walk around them. He created a physical barrier with his body, shielding her from the rushing crowd. "Hey, you're okay. You're safe now. I've got you," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to provide the first bit of solid ground the girl had touched in minutes. She didn't speak. She just stared at him, her chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths, her fingers gripping his thumb with a strength born of survival. Daniel reached out and gently brushed a stray hair from her face, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce, quiet intensity that signaled he wasn't going anywhere. He looked around for a parent, a frantic nanny, or a security guard, but the crowd continued to flow past as if nothing had happened. In a city of millions, the little girl was entirely alone, and Daniel Hayes was the only one who had stopped to notice the silence in her scream. He looked at Noah, who had stepped up beside him, his eyes reflecting his father's concern. The world was loud, but in this small circle of concrete, it was suddenly terrifyingly still. If you believe every child deserves a guardian, type, "I still show up." Daniel remained on the sidewalk, his hand still gently holding the girl's trembling palm. He realized quickly that she wasn't just scared of the traffic. She was experiencing a sensory overload that had effectively stolen her voice. A lockdown of the soul common in children when the world becomes too large to process. He stayed calm, lowering his center of gravity even further to appear less intimidating, using the same soothing, rhythmic tone he used when Noah had a nightmare about the dark. He didn't pepper her with frantic, high-decibel questions like, "Where is your mother?" or "How did you get here?" He knew those would only drive her deeper into the silence. Instead, he talked about the weather, the way the clouds looked like giant pillows, and the pigeons that were pecking at a crust of bread a few feet away. He was creating a perimeter of peace in the middle of an urban war zone. Daniel called Noah over, and the 9-year-old stepped up with a maturity that made Daniel's heart swell. Noah understood the assignment without a word being spoken. He sat down on his backpack right there on the dirty concrete, ignoring the expensive suits walking past, and pulled a small, well-worn fidget spinner from his pocket. "Hi, I'm Noah," he said softly, his voice clear and friendly. "This thing helps when my brain feels too loud. It makes the world go in a circle instead of a zigzag. You want to try?" He held out the toy, the bearings spinning with a faint, comforting whir. Slowly, the girl's eyes drifted from the terrifying rush of the street to Noah's kind, unthreatening face. A tiny, shaky hand reached out and touched the spinning plastic. And for the first time, the girl's breathing began to regulate. The tightness in her jaw loosened. Daniel watched them, his hand resting on the girl's shoulder, a silent anchor in the storm. After nearly 10 minutes of quiet sitting, the girl finally looked up at Daniel. Her eyes were still red-rimmed, but the glassiness was gone. "I can't find my mom," she breathed, her voice so small it was nearly lost in the wind. "We were walking, and a big dog barked, and she let go of my hand for just a second to fix her shoe, and then everyone was moving, and I couldn't see her anymore." Daniel nodded slowly, offering no judgment, no lecture on the dangers of wandering. "I'm not going to leave you until we find her, Sophia. That's a promise. We're a team now. You, me, and Noah." He didn't know her name yet, but he used a tone of such absolute certainty that the girl believed him instantly. He remained with her, a human anchor in the rushing tide of New York City. He didn't call the police immediately. He knew from experience that sirens, uniforms, and the sudden arrival of authority might shatter the fragile peace they had built. He waited, his internal radar scanning the faces of every person who passed, looking for the reflection of the girl's panic in someone else's eyes. He looked for the searching gaze, the frantic movements of a parent who had just realized their heart was missing. Then the atmosphere of the street shifted with a sudden, mechanical violence that signaled the arrival of immense power. Three massive, armor-plated black SUVs with tinted windows and strobe lights integrated into the grills pulled up to the curb with a synchronized, heavy screech of tires. The street, which had been loud with normal traffic, was suddenly filled with the low, aggressive growl of high-performance V8 engines. Doors flew open simultaneously, and six men in sharp, charcoal suits and tactical earpieces stepped out into the rain that was just starting to fall. They didn't run. They moved with a terrifying, calculated precision, fanning out across the sidewalk to secure every possible exit. They were professionals, and their eyes were scanning the crowd not for a person, but for a target or a threat. They moved like a single cold machine, their presence pushing the crowd back like a physical force. The lead agent, a man with a face like carved granite and a scar running through his left eyebrow, spotted Daniel kneeling beside the girl. He approached with an aura of intense, barely contained aggression, his hand hovering near his jacket in a way that made Daniel's military instincts flare. He saw the tactical stance, the way the man was evaluating Daniel's threat level. Noah instinctively stood up and moved closer to his father, sensing the sudden shift from a rescue to a confrontation. The agents surrounded them, creating a human wall of muscle and technology that separated them from the rest of Manhattan. Daniel didn't flinch. He stood up slowly, keeping his body between the girl and the agents, his expression unbothered by their presence. He wasn't looking at their suits or their earpieces. He was looking at their eyes, waiting for them to recognize the child they were supposedly protecting but had clearly failed to keep track of. "Step back, sir," the lead agent barked, his voice a sharp command that drew the attention of every passerby. "Now!" Daniel didn't move. He looked at the agent with a gaze that was far older and more dangerous than the man expected. "She's with me," Daniel said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that cut through the agent's authority. "And she's staying with me until I see her mother." The agent hesitated, surprised by the lack of fear in the man before him. He saw the calloused hands, the work jacket, and the calm, unshakable eyes. He realized he wasn't dealing with a civilian bystander. He was dealing with a protector. Respect isn't given, it's carried. Comment. I carry mine. The standoff lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity in the cold New York air. The lead agent spoke into his cuff, his voice a sharp, urgent rasp. "Code Alpha secure. 57th and 5th. Target is unharmed and in the custody of a civilian. Proceed with extraction." He then looked at Daniel, his expression shifting from suspicion to a grudging, professional respect. He saw the way Daniel was positioned, always keeping himself between the girl and the road, always aware of his surroundings. "I'm Agent Miller. We'll take it from here, sir," the man said, his tone softening slightly. But the girl, whose name Daniel still didn't know, grabbed Daniel's thumb with a sudden, desperate strength. She wasn't ready to let go of the man who had pulled her from the dark. That was the moment Twist 1 hit the air. The girl wasn't just a lost child. She was Sophia Laurent, the 7-year-old daughter of Victoria Laurent, the billionaire CEO of Laurent Global and one of the most powerful women on the planet. Sophia had wandered away from a high-profile charity gala being held at a nearby hotel. The security team had lost sight of her for exactly 7 minutes, a gap in time that had sent the upper echelons of the city's power structure into a state of absolute paralyzed panic. Daniel had unknowingly prevented a national news catastrophe, or worse, a kidnapping that would have shaken the global markets. To the men in suits, this was a failure of protocol. To Daniel, it was a failure of a mother to watch her child, and a failure of a city to notice a soul in need. Then a fourth car, a sleek black sedan with darkened windows and a silent, hybrid engine, stopped abruptly in the middle of the bus lane. The rear door opened before the car had even come to a full halt. Victoria Laurent stepped out. To the world, Victoria was the Iron Queen of Wall Street, a woman of absolute composure, sharp angles, and clinical decision-making. Her face was on the cover of every business magazine, her name a synonym for success and ruthlessness. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, That persona shattered like a sheet of falling glass, hitting marble. She saw her daughter sitting on a backpack, holding a cheap plastic fidget spinner, and the billionaire CEO simply vanished. In her place was a mother who had spent the last 7 minutes believing her soul had been torn from her body. Victoria ran toward them, her high heels clicking frantically on the concrete, a sound that made the security guards snap to attention like dolls. She threw herself onto the ground, her expensive designer silk dress touching the dirty, oil-stained sidewalk as she pulled Sophia into her arms. She buried her face in the girl's hair, her body racking with a silent, heavy sob of pure, unadulterated relief. She held her so tightly that Sophia gasped, but the girl didn't pull away. She buried her face in her mother's neck, the two of them becoming a single unit of grief and recovery in the middle of the busy street. Daniel stood back, giving them space, his eyes on the horizon to ensure the perimeter remained secure. He knew this moment. He had lived the opposite of it 5 years ago, standing in a hospital room where the relief never came. He felt a sharp, familiar pang of loss, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of satisfaction. Today, the story had a different ending. After a long, heavy minute of silence, Victoria looked up. She didn't look at her security team, who were now standing with their heads bowed in shame, and she didn't look at the crowd of onlookers who were recording the scene on their phones. She looked at Daniel. She looked at his work jacket, his calloused, grease-stained hands, and the modest life he represented. She saw the man who had stood in the gap when her own multi-million-dollar army had failed her. She realized with a jolt of terrifying clarity that this man, this stranger with the tired eyes, had been the only thing between her daughter and a cold, indifferent tragedy. The Iron Queen froze, her eyes searching Daniel's face for a reason, a catch, or a price tag. She was used to a world where every act of kindness was a transaction, where every save came with an invoice. But she found none of those things. She found only the quiet, weary peace of a man who did the right thing because it was the only thing to do. She saw a hero who didn't want to be a hero. The silence in the middle of the Manhattan intersection was absolute, broken only by the hum of the idling SUVs and the distant, fading wail of a siren. Victoria Laurent, a woman who controlled the futures of thousands, felt suddenly, profoundly small in the presence of Daniel Hayes. She realized that her power came from bank accounts, but his power came from his soul. If you believe true power is found in character, not cash, type, "I see value." Victoria Laurent stood up slowly, her legs still trembling from the massive adrenaline crash. She tried to regain a fraction of her composure, her executive training kicking in as she brushed the dust from her skirt. She looked at Daniel, her eyes still red-rimmed and glistening under the streetlights. I don't know where to begin," she started, her voice formal and practiced, the CEO mask trying to slide back into place. "I appreciate what you did for my daughter, Mr. Hayes. Daniel Hayes," he answered simply, his hands tucked into his pockets, his posture relaxed. Victoria nodded, her hand reaching for her designer bag, her mind already calculating the proper reward for a life saved. She was thinking about trusts, scholarships, perhaps a direct wire transfer that would change his life overnight. "I want to ensure you are compensated for your time, for your bravery. Whatever you need, I can provide it. My office will contact you tomorrow to discuss the details." But as she spoke the words, she looked down at Sophia. The girl was now holding Noah's hand, the two of them looking at a passing bus. She saw the way Sophia was looking at Daniel, not with the awe of a subject for a queen, but with a profound, soul-deep trust that Victoria realized her daughter didn't even have for the security team. The formality in Victoria's voice suddenly cracked, then shattered completely. She looked at Daniel's hands again, the hands that had caught her daughter. They weren't the hands of a man who wanted a reward. They were the hands of a father. A single heavy tear tracked down her cheek, followed by another. She didn't try to wipe them away this time. She didn't look at the cameras of the onlookers or the faces of her guards. She sank back down to her knees right there on the sidewalk, and she broke down in front of a man who worked for an hourly wage. "I almost lost her," she whispered, the words catching in her throat, raw and unshielded. "I build empires, Daniel. I control billions of dollars in assets. I move markets with a single text. But for 7 minutes, I was nothing. I was a ghost. I have all this power, and I couldn't keep a child safe at a crosswalk. I've spent so much time being a billionaire that I forgot how to be a mother." She looked at Daniel with a raw vulnerability that no board member, no competitor, and no lover had ever seen. She was exposed, her success feeling like a hollow, gilded cage. Daniel didn't interrupt her. He didn't offer a cliche like "everything happens for a reason" or a pitying smile. He simply stood there, a rock in the middle of her emotional storm. He waited for her to breathe. Then he offered a small, grounding nod. "You didn't lose her," Daniel said quietly, his voice like a warm blanket. "She was never lost. She was just waiting for you to find the right way to look for her." That line hit Victoria with the force of a physical blow to the heart. She realized that while she had been busy being Victoria Laurent, Daniel had been busy being a father. She realized that in the eyes of her daughter, Daniel was the one who had been powerful today, because he was the one who noticed. The moment became profoundly human, a collision of two worlds that usually never touched, were unified by the terrifying fragility of a parent's love. Victoria reached out and touched Sophia's hand, then looked back at Daniel with a newfound intense curiosity. She wasn't looking for a way to pay him anymore. She was looking for a way to understand the peace he carried in his calloused hands. She realized that the most valuable asset in New York that day wasn't her company. It was the character of the man standing in front of her. If protecting someone matters more than anything, type, "I would step in." As the security team began to usher Victoria and Sophia toward the car, the lead agent, Miller, handed Victoria a tablet with a background check he had run in seconds. Victoria looked at the screen. The military service, the loss of his wife, the choice to take a lower-paying job to be with his son. She looked at Daniel, who was already starting to walk away with Noah, his toolbox slung over his shoulder. "Daniel!" she called out. He stopped and turned. Victoria walked over to him, her steps slow and deliberate. She didn't offer a check this time. She offered her hand. "I offered you money because that's the only language I know how to speak anymore," she said, her voice steady but humble. "But I realize now that you can't buy what you gave me today. You gave me back my life, and you showed me what a real leader looks like." Daniel took her hand, his grip firm and honest. "She's a good kid, Victoria. She just needs her mom to be the one who notices when the light changes. That's the only job that matters." Noah looked up at his father, his chest swelling with a pride that no amount of money could ever buy. He saw his dad not as a technician, but as a hero who didn't need a reward to be great. Sophia stepped forward and gave Daniel a quick, fierce hug around his waist before being lifted into the black car. The SUVs pulled away, disappearing into the New York traffic as quickly as they had arrived. Life on 57th Street returned to its frantic, noisy routine. The pigeons returned to their bread, and the crowd surged forward on the next walk signal. But for Daniel and Noah, the air felt different, lighter, as if the weight of the city had been lifted for a moment. A few days later, a simple, handwritten envelope was delivered to Daniel's modest apartment. It wasn't from a corporation, it was from a mother. Victoria Laurent didn't visit him with a camera crew or a PR team. She arrived alone, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, looking more like a neighbor than a billionaire. She thanked him again, this time with a calm, real sincerity that showed she had finally learned how to breathe. She didn't offer him a job or a check. She offered to fund a new community safety and mentorship initiative in Noah's school district, specifically designed to train veterans to protect and guide the youth of the city. Most importantly, she asked if Sophia and Noah could have a play date. Daniel Hayes had saved a daughter, but in doing so, he had invited a mother to come back to the things that actually mattered. He proved that in a world of billions, the most powerful person is the one who chooses to notice a single soul. Final voiceover. Ending. He didn't know who she was. He didn't check her bank balance before he reached for her hand. Because when someone needs help, you don't look at their status. You look at their heart. Daniel Hayes proved that the most powerful person in a city of millions is the one who chooses to notice when a light goes out in someone's eyes. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Chip Healing Stories, where true connection begins with a simple act of kindness.